Ros, Ros Croucher, the President of the Commission, and the Attorney will be here shortly, and then we can get underway. I think we're ready to start, everybody. I hear our special guests are here. So I'm Megan Mitchell, I'm the National Children's Commissioner, and I want to thank you all for coming here today to be part of the launch of the 2017 Children's Rights Report. This is actually my 5th report, so I started as the first Children's Commissioner back in 2013. And this report in particular details the work that I completed last year and tracks the progress of how recommendations from my Children's Rights Report have gone since 2013 and have been implemented. And over the course of last year, as you probably all know, because some of you have picked up the report, I conducted a project investigating the rights and needs of young parents and their children. So Just a little bit about housekeeping before we go further. If you could put your mobile phones to silent or off, but you can maintain your vibrations if that makes you feel good. In the case of an emergency, do not look at me. Somebody with a red or yellow hat will come in and tell you what to do. Parts of the launch will be filmed or photographed. So if you don't want to be filmed, please let us know, and we'll make sure that we avoid you or pixelate you or something. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge all the dignitaries here today, the Attorney General, the Honourable Christian Porter, our new Attorney General, Senator Louise Pratt is here as well. So we have a great Western contingent here. Commission President, the Emeritus Professor Rosalind Croucher, fellow Commissioners, Jenkins, Oscar, Santow, McEwen. Is that it? Okay, if I've missed Sue Palmerson, but he's not here. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of them. And all of you, of course, all of you are dignitaries in your own right. And I also now want to acknowledge Yvonne Weldon, who is to conduct the welcome to country. Yvonne is a proud Wiradjuri woman, originally from Cowra, New South Wales, and has strong ties to that homeland in Cowra and the Riverina areas. She's also the chairperson of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council. So please, can you welcome Yvonne? Thank you.
Good morning. Attorney General Christian Porter, Senator Louise Pratt, Professor Rosalind Croucher, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers. As was said, my name is Yvonne Weldon. I am a Wiradjuri woman originally from Cowra here in New South Wales. I'm from the waters of the Clare, also known as the Lachlan, and of the Murrumbidgee Rivers. I'm the elected chairperson of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who are the cultural authority under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act for the land we're meeting on. I would like to pay my respects to all elders, past and present, and to all First Nations and non-First Nations people here today. We're meeting here on the lands of the Eora Nation. The boundaries of the traditional owners are not defined by a hand and by a pen, but through the natural landscapes of the earth. The Eora Nation's country covers the Hawkesbury River in the north, the Nepean in the west, and the Georges River in the south. My people have practiced our traditions for thousands of years and endless generations. One tradition that is shared in various forms across Australia is a welcome to country. As you travel across this beautiful country of ours, understand you're entering the lands of a nation, a tribe, and a clan, which has existed for over 60,000 years. The First Nations of this country are from the oldest living culture of the world. Our practice and our traditions have sustained us, and they are embedded into the core of this nation. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, the elders, and the members, I welcome everyone to the land of the Gadigal and acknowledge the Gadigal people whose spirits and ancestors will always remain with this land, our Mother Earth. Let us all recognise the sacrifices that have been made, the ones we will continue to make, and the ones we shouldn't have to. There have been many lessons learned at our expense and our devastation. They should and must be acknowledged, not out of a guilt, but to listen, learn, and to come together, to commence a healing and creating a future for all. Let us not live regretting what we should have done, but create the legacy of what must be done. As you connect, learn, and share, today, tomorrow, and beyond, continue to lead the way, never losing sight of the important work that still needs to be done to bring my people, your people, and our people together. Make real changes, not just symbolic ones. If we are to move forward, we need to work in partnerships equally. All of us can make a positive change for this country now and into the future. To make that future possible, let us all draw upon my people's spirits as we continue on our journey. May my people's spirits walk with you and guide you as we strive forward for us all. Again, on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, welcome to Gadigal land. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Yvonne, for that moving and powerful welcome to country, and I too wish to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and thank them for allowing us to gather on their lands today. I'd now wish to welcome to the lectern the President of the Human Rights Commission, Emeritus Professor Rosalind Croucher, and I want to personally thank her too for her commitment to the rights of children and young people.
Thank you very much, Megan, and thank you, Yvonne, for your warm welcome. And I also pay my respects to Gadigal elders past and present, and acknowledge any Indigenous guests with us today, and also to acknowledge any emerging leaders in the Indigenous community. Attorney General, it's wonderful that you've joined us. Senator Pratt, it's nice to see you again this week. And to my fellow commissioners, to all of our wonderful guests here, filling the room with energy, with joy, and with commitment to the wonderful work of our Children's Commissioner, Megan Mitchell. Attorney, congratulations on your appointment as the first Law Officer of the Commonwealth, a very important role for us. And it's a great honour that you've joined me and my fellow commissioners here today to launch the Children's Report 2017. I'd really like to thank Megan for your important work in 2017. The Human Rights Commission Act says very simply this: there is to be a National Children's Commissioner. It's very Genesis-like. There is to be. Let it happen. And it did. And it is Megan. And the Commissioner's functions, Megan's functions, include promoting discussion and awareness of and respect for the human rights of children in Australia, and to report to the Attorney-General on the protection of their human rights, which is the focal point today. Megan is the first National Children's Commissioner, and when I started at the Commission 7 months ago, I was so struck by Megan's office. You couldn't see into it because of the wonderful artwork from children that is now on the wall at the back. Beautiful paintings. Megan adopted the strategy of the big banter, and her connection with children is just beautiful. And some of the children's sharing with her is on the wall. Her office is full of the voices of children. Each year, Megan has chosen a theme for her report, and this is her 5th. And the theme of this particular report concerns the rights and needs of young parents and their children, as well as pregnant young people. It will provide valuable insights into the experiences of expecting and parenting teenagers and what needs to be done to support this vulnerable group of children and young people. And in relation to this particular research, we're very privileged to have 2 guest speakers, Julianne King, a young mother, and Bernadette Black, CEO and founding director of Brave Foundation. Thank you very much for coming to share this important day with us. The report that we're launching today recommends clear action to provide better protection of the rights of children and young people, and Megan will speak to the report later. Across all our policy areas, complaints, legal intervention, education and promotional activities, we work to ensure respect for the rights of all children across Australia, especially those who are most vulnerable to human rights violations. But that's in common with the work we do across the board in relation to all people in Australia and human rights issues. Today, the focus is on children. The future of our country is in our children, and the most vulnerable of our children need our most respect and our most attention to ensure that their futures are ones that they will be proud of us. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming and sharing this joyous moment. Commissions these are our births. There are births, deaths and marriages that are respected across the community. These are our births. And I think for a children's report, it is a beautiful birth, and I'm delighted that the attorney is the midwife today. So let me thank you for coming, and I look forward to hearing the launch and also the remarks from our Children's Commissioner. So thank you.
Thank you, Ros. I'd now like to introduce Julianne King, who is a young parent herself, to tell us a little bit about her journey as a young parent and who has helped her along the way, and what barriers she's faced and how she's overcome them. When we talked to Julianne as part of this project, and we were so impressed with her insights into her journey and what could be better done for young people in this situation, and also her resilience. And I think a lot of these young parents are incredibly resilient, and they're also very aspirational for their children and for themselves. So Julianne, over to you.
Hi, my name is Julianne, and I am a proud Koori woman from the Gundagara people, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about myself and about my experience as a young mum. I'm 26 years old now, and I have 4 beautiful girls. I had my first baby at 18. When I had my first baby, I started studying whilst looking after her. I was studying at a Youth Off the Streets music program, part-time, run through Mission Australia and TAFE New South Wales. It was very hard to manage my time. I put my baby in daycare, which became too expensive. Financially, it wasn't possible for me to keep studying whilst looking after her, and I was missing out on time to bond with my child. Being with her was my main focus, as the first 2 years are the most important. Maybe someday I'd like to go back to study when all my girls are in school and I have more time to focus on my career. I have a lot of support from my in-laws when I had my children. They would help me out, even if it was cooking an extra meal. On occasions when one of my little ones were sick, they would look after the other children, especially if I had to take them to the doctors or the hospital. My family and my friends are my go-to people who support me. One thing I learned after having my children is that family isn't always blood. I have friends that I consider to be more sisters than friends. I didn't come from a loving home. I spent 2 years of my childhood in care. My mother was removed from her family and grew up in a girls' and boys' home in the Southern Highlands. You don't have to come from a good home or background to be able to parent. When I was pregnant, I found the Malabar midwives at the Royal Hospital for Women the most helpful. The midwives there were wonderful. I went to them for my antenatal appointments, and they have stayed with me through my whole journey, and they follow my children's growth. I receive a lot of support from my community as well. The Nulla Nungamai parent group run at Laparoos Aboriginal Health Centre is my second family. It is delivered by the community Sydney Children's Health, run through the Sydney Children's Hospital. It is a fantastic program. It's basically my second family, as we are all there for one another. The beautiful and deadly women there have supported me through some of the hardest times of my life. It really is a safe place to open up. I'd love to see more culturally appropriate programs and support services for young Aboriginal families that would improve the experience of young parents. I think that more young parents groups should be made available, even if it's just somewhere you can go and have some morning tea and chat with other young mums. It's good to hear about their experiences. It's an opportunity for us to build networks and make new friends. In my personal experience, I have found all age mum groups to be quite judgmental. I have constantly had comments made like, "Are they all yours? But you look so young." No more, right? It's not okay to make comments like that. Age does not determine whether you're going to be a good parent or not. Everyone can struggle at times. Parenting isn't always going to be easy. Young parents need to be given more of a chance to show that we are quite capable of being able to parent. Some just need more support than others. My experience being a young parent would have been made better with more support and less intervention from family and community services. Instead of removing our children from young parents or judging them because they are young, I think family and community services could work with young parents more to support them. Young mums and dads should also have access to lower childcare rates while they are studying or working part-time. I worked part-time when I had my youngest 3 children. Even with a childcare rebate, it didn't cover the cost of childcare. My wages were pretty much going straight to childcare fees. Working with young parents to keep children in a safe and loving home would change the experience of young parents so that they can support their children and live happy lives. Becoming a young mum has changed my life. It made me grow up and it gave me a whole new perspective on my life. Even though it's hard at times, being a young mum is so rewarding. It has given meaning to my life, and I would not know life without my daughters in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Julianne. Your story is so important. It's so important for you to tell it, not for me to tell it. And I think there's a lot of instructive information in there for us to take away and think about. And it's clear that your kids are going to grow up with a wonderful parent. So thank you. Now, I'd now like to invite Bernadette Black to speak. Bernadette is the CEO of and founding director of Brave Foundation, a national organisation that was set up to support expecting and parenting teenagers. Since becoming a young mother herself at the age of 16, so that was pretty early, Bernadette's professional and personal life has taken a lot of twists and turns, and in doing that, in taking those twists and turns, the whole nation is benefiting from what she's doing today. Bernadette is the 2017 Telstra Tasmanian Businesswoman of the Year and a former Barnardo's Australian Mother of the Year. She's also a registered nurse, so she's a bit of an overachiever here, wife and mother of 3. Please welcome Bernadette.
Thank you very much, Megan. And my goodness, Gillian, my hero of the day. Another round of applause. You were so brave. I want to be like you when I grow up, if that's okay. I'll get some tips off you. Really extraordinary. Thank you. Your voice is so important. I'd also like to pass to give my respects to elders past and present with the Aboriginal community. Thank you so much for your warm welcome to country. It is just wonderful to be here today, Commissioners, Minister Porter, Senator. It's really great and tremendous beginning for our nation, I believe, and something that I wondered at times also whether I would actually live to see in my lifetime. And here we are today launching this report. It is quite amazing. I'll give you a bit of background why. I remember with a 4-week-old baby in suburban Melbourne, I'd made myself 3 promises as a teenage mum. It hadn't, been an easy journey for me. My dad went out into the middle of the main road of the suburb of where I lived in Watsonia and went into the middle of the main road and screamed to the whole of the suburb that his 16-year-old daughter had sex and now was pregnant. And I remember what my mum did. She went and she made a cup of tea, which was a very good idea. She brought one into me in my bedroom. I think she brought one out to Dad in the middle of the main road. And I'm sure she made one for herself. But I can remember after that time going to catch a bus and I had this baby. Yes, I guess, Megan, I am a bit of a high achiever, but my life has taught me to do this and I made sure my baby looked perfect. I didn't want anyone, and you understand this, Gillian, to look and think, being a mum then in my 20s, I realised all babies have snot, but I didn't want anyone to look at my baby and think that, oh, look at him, he's so grotty, and look at her, she's such a young mum. And so I made sure that he looked perfect, and those expectations were so huge. So here I was, still recovering from the birth that was quite traumatic, and I had made myself 3 promises. The first was to be a good mum. I hardly knew how I was going to do that. I wasn't going to whack a grade on it because I certainly didn't think I could be a great one, but maybe a good one. The second promise was to one day finish my education. I had no idea how I'd do that. Mum and Dad had only finished year 9 themselves. My dad was a cleaner and an insurance clerk, and my mum worked part-time at the local kitchen at the hospital. And then my third promise was to, one day write a book, a pamphlet or something to help other women that were in the same situation as me. And so I wrote down these 3 promises, and with those in mind, I went to go and catch a bus. And I looked, it was about 8:30 in the morning, sort of peak hour time, and the bus was full. The bus stop had people going up to it. And it took me, I think it was all of, the whole month since I'd had my baby to learn how to pack a nappy bag. And so I had the nappy bag packed, Damien in the pram, and I looked up and I sort of smiled pleadingly. I inside was like this good girl, and I wanted people to like me. And I looked up at the bus driver and sort of smiled and pleadingly looked at him thinking, how are you going to help me get up there with this pram? And then he said something so shocking that I'm not going to repeat it to you today. The truth was that I got up onto that bus. Some kind bystander helped me get up there. I was pretty upset by the time I did. But probably the most important part of this part of the story I'm sharing with you is that where that bus was going was the only adult education place that I could find that would accept me to be able to finish my year 11 and year 12. And that's where I was heading. Everything, every roadblock literally got in the way to inhibit me from having what every other Australian teenager was able to have. So that little baby now is 24. He was married only a month ago, and I'm now a mother-in-law, and I said to my daughter-in-law, does it mean that I'm going to get a crooked nose overnight? That didn't happen. and he's now 24. I can remember when things were very tumultuous. My mum was sick. My dad was very angry. We were in a very tough situation at home. I went to a year 10 year level coordinator, an absolute mess, and he thankfully said words to me that have created the person that I am today. And he looked at me and he said to me, Bernie, the journey might be different now, but the destination can stay the same. I was like, hang on a minute. You're not screaming to the whole of, the school. You're not sick like my mum. The journey might be different, but the destination can stay the same. So on the bus that day, I saw a pathway, not a roadblock, and a way for all expecting and parenting teens in Australia, and somehow knew that my life would be to serve this nation, and this would ultimately be creating the charity Brave Foundation. I wrote a story about a book about my story called Brave Little Bear. I was looking up baby names for my son Damien and actually thought, I wonder what my name means, Bernadette. And I looked it up and it said brave as a bear. And I thought, you know what, that's just what I've got to be. You feel like it, don't you, sometimes? And so that was the name of my book. There was so much interest in 2006 when this was launched. It has a life of its own now across Australia, that I had people calling me from all over this amazing country of ours saying, where can my daughter, where can my best friend's son, where can we find a pathway for this person to get support and education wherever they are in Australia? So what I did was, as a registered nurse at this time and having studied perioperative nursing, was I sat with my husband, who is a very brave man and also a great mate, and we sat with the book How to Start a Not-for-Profit for Dummies in 2018 and started Brave Foundation. Now, actually going forward, and to say now that we have an incredible board, national board with skills mix directors, our former Premier, Honourable David Bartlett as Chair, Australian Lawyer of the Year, Nor Bloomer, Female Lawyer of the Year, amongst 6 other national directors since 2013 has been quite a journey. We have seen enormous growth and influence. In 2015 and 16, Brave Foundation led a national working group, which was called the Supporting Expecting and Parenting Teens Towards Education and Support. This saw 30 members come together to strategise a way forward for expecting and parenting teens, with the aim of being able to enable them to have the same access to opportunities and education, as I said before, to any other young person in Australia. Members included commissioners to state ministers, teen parents, most importantly, social workers, maternal and child health workers, psychologists, you name it. If they were and had a role with the expecting and parenting team, they were on this working group. With support from Deloitte Access Economics and the Peter Underwood Centre from the University of Tasmania, we focused on the facts and the evidence base that we could find. And some really facts of importance here today are these. 79% of expecting and parenting teens are on long-term welfare. Each expecting and parenting teen has an actuarial life analysis costing the government $648,000. But most importantly, and we've just heard it this morning, expecting and parenting teens have high hopes for their dreams, their aspirations, and their careers. However, there hasn't been a pathway that they've been able to reach for them. I knew a longitudinal pathway plan from pregnancy to the first and second year of childhood was imperative to the strategy from my own experience as a teenage mum. The working group concluded that a pathway plan was what was needed, and we represented all points from the expecting and parenting teens journey that I've gone through, the interactions with government departments, NGOs, significant stakeholders, with the inclusion of goal setting, so possibly making 3 promises like I did, how to pack a nappy bag, maternity leave like any other mother, and importantly, attendance at perinatal and antenatal checks as well. Again, expecting and parenting teens have low attendance rate at these clinics, not because they don't want to attend, but because they might not have a licence yet, or they might not be on a bus route. They physically don't have a pathway to get there, almost like me at that bus stop. The Brave Pathway Plan has now been established, which is very exciting, through the working group of Brave Foundation. And we only last Monday have signed off and have been awarded the largest grant from Tranche 1 of the Try, Test and Learn Fund to fund the Supporting Expecting and Parenting Teen Trial Pathway. And I want to just say now, Minister Porter, what a journey it has been. I can remember actually when there was 380 ideas submitted for Try, Test and Learn, then 100 organisations a year ago in Melbourne for a policy hack, then 30 organisations brought together for further co-development and design, and now we're actually implementing this pathway plan with 250 to 500 teenagers in Australia over the next 2 years, being led by Brave Foundation. Thank you so much for this thinking. My chairman, former premier, has said he has never seen this type of proactive collaboration in a government before, and we really commend you on that as well. It's a very exciting time. My life story and the incredible village of people in it give testimony that when a strategy is executed to bring support and acceptance around a person, both their social and economic outcomes are seriously altered for the betterment of all in our communities. It's that village of support, community capacity, and that savings both socially and also economically for government. Something that I'm so excited, and Jelaine, it might be something you might look at, is that we will have scholarships as a part of this program. So when and if there's a time in the future you would like to look at returning to education, please contact me and we will look at that. Ironically, actually, this year I pay off my help debt, which was the only way that I actually could continue my education with my son from a 16-year-old mum. So it is really important, and you are an investment to our nation. I'd like to commend the National Children Commissioner for her vision, passion, and being brave enough to focus on this voice of expecting and parenting teens in your annual report. Another first of many for you, Megan, in our nation's history. It's the embodiment of your thinking, and Ros, you as well, and commissioners here today, alongside our politicians and those of influence, that will see implementation of practical policy that enables creation of support, acceptance, and pathways towards those experiencing heightened vulnerability in our nation, and in this case today, expecting and parenting teens. I firmly believe that our best days for our children and young people are yet to come. We're starting them. Furthermore, I believe that the leadership that we see again, Megan, demonstrated here today, that our country will be a beacon of light to other nations in creating real pathway opportunities forwards for those experiencing heightened vulnerability. Megan, congratulations again, sincerely. This is a game changer for us, and a dream I hope to be able to be alive to see, and here I am seeing it in my lifetime. It is tremendous. Thank you for being a champion for our children and young people as you lead this foundational move. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bernadette. Actually doing this work, I was inspired by Bernadette and her advocacy, along with that of others. So she's the reason behind all of this, and plus some of the work the government was doing at the time as well, which I'm sure the Attorney will talk a little bit about. But I'm sure too the government can be assured that Bernadette will deliver on anything she says she will do. I'd like to just take a moment before I introduce the Attorney to acknowledge the fact that there's also at least one other young parent in the room, and Bowie over there. And Bowie is a client or somebody who works with the Red Cross who have a parenting program as well. So we were able through this project to connect up with a lot of young people and the people that work with them. So I just want to acknowledge you in the room. Okay, so at this point, I would like to now call on the Attorney, the Australian Attorney General, the Honourable Christian Porter, to officially launch the report, after which I will say a few words about the report. If we run over time, I think we're going to be okay. The AG might have to run off to a plane, but I think he's going to be okay, yeah. But I do want to thank the Attorney for being here and being part of this. As the former Minister for Social Services, he had a particular interest in this issue, and so it was really fitting that he come as attorney with that past history, interested in young parents and how we can put them on a better trajectory in life. So without further ado, Attorney, thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. And if I might just begin by formally acknowledging the traditional custodians of land on which we are meeting and pay my respect to their elders, and to thank you for that very lovely welcome to country. Also officially acknowledge Professor Rosalind Croucher, who is our Australian Human Rights Commission Emeritus Professor and Commissioner, and Megan Mitchell, obviously the National Children's Commissioner. And Louise, Senator Pratt, it's good to see you there. Louise and I have spent a lot of time on planes together, so we're good friends across the benches. Look, I did get the department to draft me a speech, but if I knew that we were going to be exchanging parenting stories, I wouldn't have bothered. So I'll give you my parenting story. And Julianne, something that you said really struck me, which is how judgmental people are about parenting. And I mean, it's not a criticism of people being judgmental, because I did it as well. I mean, inevitably we will have a kid who gets overtired and has an absolute meltdown in Coles. And the instinct is to look at that and just go, you know, it's an immediate instinct. So it was, as soon as you said that, it just rang out in my ears. And so I'm going to give you my judgmental parenting story. And you both had the experience of young parents. I had the experience of being a very old parent. So my first was born when I was at the end of my 45th year of life. And my wife and I had gone through rounds of IVF, and we tried and tried and tried for a long time after 10 years of marriage. And all of that has all its stresses as well. So I was at the other end of the spectrum. My wife's considerably younger than me, so she was still fit and healthy. But it was like having a child for me was like someone throwing a hand grenade into my life. I'd become so, well, but I mean, you had that experience very young. I was so set in my ways, so narrow and fastidious, and had expected things just to go a certain way, that when he arrived, I actually found the first 18 months unbelievably difficult. And we have kind of an odd lifestyle. But my judgmental parenting story is that when in this job, like I'm away every week and cabinet and so forth, and actually Lachlan arrived. So I got sworn in as the Social Services Minister on a call from the PM on a Sunday afternoon. I got sworn in on a Monday. I flew back on the midnight horror to Perth on a Monday night, and Lachlan was born in an elective caesarean at 7:30 the next morning. So I got home, had a shower, grabbed that nappy bag, which fortunately Jen had packed, and got off to the hospital. And then, so I got home, and then 3 or 4 days later, Jen and Lachlan come home, and literally, so this little baby arrives at home, and also 43 lever arch folders of incoming ministerial briefs. It was a really bad couple of weeks, and they, at the end, the good ones were covered in milk vomit, and I won't tell you what the bad ones were covered in. So, but and coming back and forward and being away a lot, you have the typical guilty father thing. So I'm always trying to insert myself into parenting as much as I can. And And of course, you have this experience where your wife's very, very good at it, and I'm not at all good at it. And so you are constantly being lectured. No, he doesn't like the food that way. No, that's not the right hat, and all that sort of stuff. And it's actually really interesting watching Kelly O'Dwyer, because her husband John Mant does the child rearing. He's a merchant banker. He took a couple of years off, and so Jen and I go and have dinner with them, and it's the reverse. Like Kelly comes in and John's sitting at dinner going, no, she doesn't like her beanie that way. I just sort of see it. But recently we were coming back on a flight from Canberra, and we're an economy. I don't ever want my boy to think that business class is usual travel. So we travel in economy. We're down the back, and of course he does a poo on the flight, and I'm trying to be good dad, and I said, well, look, Jen, I'll do it. Don't worry, I'll sort it out. So I pick him up and go back down, and it's just that point in the flight where there's a queue of like about 9 people waiting down the back, and this is a bad one. Like people are like, anyone who's seen Casino Royale and the Bond villain's like bleeding from his eye. Like I was wondering whether or not this was going to happen to me, but I got right down to the actual toilet, and one of the lovely hostesses there that we get to know very well said, "Oh, Mr. Porter, you can go up to the front of the plane and use that toilet." And I said, "Oh, I'm here now." And she said, "No, go to the front." So I turn around and wander all the way up the front, and then there's a queue, and then we get to the front, and the other hostess at the front of the plane goes, "Oh, Miss Quill, I shouldn't have sent you up here. We don't have a change table." So I go back down to the other end of the plane, and at this stage, we have not struck while the iron is hot, and Lachlan's really cracking it. And he starts saying, "Daddy, Daddy, don't hurt me." Because he knows that we're about to go in and it's cramped, and he's changing, "Daddy, Daddy, don't hurt me." And everyone on the plane turns around, sees this kind of older looking dad with this kid saying, "Daddy, Daddy, don't hurt me." And your heart just sinks. Because, if I'm sitting there watching that, I'm thinking as well, what's that weird guy doing? But people can be really, really judgmental, and we all do it. So it's just interesting having your experience delivered and hearing that. But look, Megan, thank you very much for the report. We're here to officially launch it. This portfolio is very much focused around children and children's rights in many ways, as was my previous portfolio. So I'm dealing with collating and reporting the government's responses to the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse, and that is a major job. In social services, I put together the redress model, which we're very much hoping that the states and territories will announce soon that they're joining in that respect. And of course, in social services, we work together with Brave on the Try, Test, Learn Fund. So I just might say 2 things about those issues. These are very complicated areas, but I have a conviction belief that employment changes lives, and mixing employment with motherhood is also intensely difficult. So my wife has the same experience that you've had, and I earn a very strong income by Australian standards as a minister. My wife works as a 0.7 academic at a law school teaching criminal law and evidence, and almost every cent that she earns goes to childcare, almost every cent. And that is a very often dispiriting thing, because of course you get tired, you're working, you're child rearing, and you come home. And at our end of the income scale, that's just how it's going to be, and that's how it is. And so Jen's connectivity to the workforce is very much about a commitment and about that kind of future. But helping people who are in the situation of young mums get into employment, stay into employment, and maintain that connectivity is just critical. And as a government, I am earnestly and honestly can say to you, I'm incredibly proud of what we've done. So we, on 2 July of this year, the new childcare reform model will come in, and that represents an expenditure of about $2.5 billion. And that will, I'm very assured, make it much easier, particularly at the type of end that we are where we're trying to help people to break that cycle of having too much of a wage go on childcare. And it's a $2.5 billion investment from the Australian taxpayer ultimately into childcare, and it will be unbelievably worthwhile. The other thing we've done, and the data that you heard today is data that we put together. We spent tens of millions of dollars researching lacunas and parts inside the welfare system where welfare traps happen. And what we found is that for young mothers, there is both a very high probability that there will be long-term unemployment, and there is an incredibly high probability that a young mother will have a child who will have long-term unemployment. And so what we said was, if we are going to invest resources, care and attention as we dutifully should as a society, that is where you've got to do it. Like you've got to go exactly to that point in time and try and do everything you can, throw every resource at it. And what we determined in the end was that governments are quite good sometimes of identifying problems. I think it was Ronald Reagan who said that government isn't the solution to our problems, government is the problem. I think Ronald was being a bit unkind, actually. Like, governments can be good at solving problems, but they're not perfect at it, far from it. And when governments run into trouble, it's when they don't listen to the not-for-profit or the private sector or the non-government sector as to what they would do. So Try, Test, Learn was $96 million, and we basically went out to the private not-for-profit sector and said, what would you do for these 4,800 young mums? And that was the number. Like, we had it down to a number. What would you do? And I think, was it 4 million? Yes, I remember. And we're measuring and tracking. So the reality is, and I'm highly optimistic like you are, that what you are doing is going to help break those cycles of dependency and generate larger amounts of employment and change generations of lives. But we are measuring that very, very strictly so that we have a capacity as a government to move funding and resources to things that work and move them away from things that don't work. So they're the two things that I've worked on over the last 2 years. Megan, congratulations on the report. I'm about to officially launch it. What I particularly found likeable and virtuous about the report is the interviewing process and finding out the ways in which the issues arise in a very practical sense, particularly for young families, particularly for young mums. So I think it's a very meritorious and virtuous report, and I'm looking forward to seeing the way in which it can influence and impact government behaviour. So with that, I will just do two things. First of all, formally announce that Megan's commission here has been renewed, which I informed Megan of last night, so congratulations. And with that, I will just simply say that on today, 2 March, I will formally launch the 2018 Children's Rights Reports, which has, of course, been prepared by the National Children's Commissioner, Megan Mitchell. Thank you all.
Thank you, Attorney. It's indeed an honour to do this job, an honour and a privilege, and so I'm really looking forward to doing all the things I've got in mind into the next little while. And there's always a lot to do. So thank you so much for your faith in me. I now want to just tell you a little bit about what's in the report. You will be able to access the report, the big thick one, which we seem to do every year, which has all the detail of the research that we've done and the data that's in there. There's a child-friendly version as well, and there's a summary version for people to take away. I am officially launching, you have launched my 2017 Children's Rights Report. This is my 5th report, and it does outline the findings of my investigation into the rights and needs of pregnant teenagers, young parents and their children. So Australian teenage birth rate is at an historic low. As the attorney pointed out, well, I don't think he did, actually. There are 8,574 births to teenage mothers in 2015. So about 8,500 children born to teen parents each year. And despite this, the teenage birth rate is inconsistent across the country, geographically and demographically. As you can see from the slide, teenage pregnancy is experienced more frequently by people from lower socioeconomic circumstances, by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and people in rural and remote locations. And notably, the teenage birth rate in rural and remote Australia is more than 4 times that of the general population. And more than a quarter of births of all teenage births to teenage mothers were to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young mothers. Higher rates of teenage pregnancy are associated with family histories of teenage pregnancy, unstable housing arrangements, socioeconomic disadvantage, and abuse in childhood. Young parenthood is a human rights issue. As with other children, expecting and parenting teenagers and their children are entitled to protection of their rights under the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which Australia is a signatory to. These include their rights to non-discrimination, development, access to education, to health, and an adequate standard of living. However, research tells us that young parents frequently experience poverty and long-term welfare dependency, as been discussed. And the modelling that the Australian government undertook a couple of years ago shows that 40% of teen parents are likely to be receiving welfare payments 20 years on. Further, young parents suffer from poor emotional health and well-being and are often unable to complete study or gain secure employment. They also face stigma and prejudice, which Julianne talked to us about, from the public as well as from health and other professionals. And this is a substantial barrier to accessing timely services and help. Next one. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare has identified that children born to teenage mothers are at greater risk of low birth weight and increased morbidity during their first year of life. They tend to develop more behaviour problems than children of older mothers and are more likely to be born into and continue to live in social and economic disadvantage. Their children too are at risk of being removed into the care system and are also more likely to become young parents themselves, perpetuating a cycle of intergenerational disadvantage. So in conducting this investigation, my goal was to identify the gaps in knowledge about the needs, experiences and trajectories of young parents and analyse good practice in early intervention and support services that can lead to better outcomes for them and their children. Over 8 months, I received written submissions, hosted a series of forums across Australia. I consulted with young people about their experiences, being a parent and being pregnant, and what supports they most need. I spoke with 77 young parents through individual and group consultations and received responses to a national survey from 89 expecting or parenting teenagers, and I thank Bernadette again for helping facilitate that survey. In parallel, I made a number of requests for information about programs for young parents and their children, sourced new data and reviewed relevant literature and research. So what did I find? So through the investigation, I identified quite a number of gaps in data on young parents, in particular vulnerable young parents, this including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander fertility rates, young parents in the juvenile justice system, young fathers for whom we know very little about, parenting and expecting young people who are enrolled students, and young parents and their children in child protection systems. These are all missing pieces of information and data that we do not have access to. I also identified a lack of research into employment pathways and the delivery of housing and homelessness services for young parents. So I want to share with you some of the key findings in relation to young parents and pregnant teenagers and some of the things that the young people told me during the investigation. So first, we looked at housing. Many of the young people that I spoke to were in unstable housing, and as they say, housing is probably the most important right for us. Young mothers want housing services to be improved, including their availability and the time it takes to find somewhere, especially in cases involving domestic violence. So you're a young mum, you've probably moved several times since becoming pregnant, you don't have anywhere to stay, you don't have a rental history. How are you going to get housing? Young people need help with this. And many young people also said that when they were in public housing or community housing, they felt unsafe for themselves and their children. So that's not the solution either. So we really need to try and wrap some housing solutions so they can have stability in their lives. In terms of education, overall young parents have poorer educational outcomes than other young people. Some parents are supported to stay at school, and that's great, but many are not supported. And basically, it's up to individual principals of individual schools. So there's no universal guarantee of education for young parents, and I think that's something we should look at as a nation. Young mothers said they want easier access to education and more flexibility to help them stay at school or to continue their learning. So many felt that they weren't welcome. The school told me to leave when I was pregnant. I'm going to try and learn because I can't go to school with my baby. A lot of access issues and feeling unwelcome. So in terms of, you've already mentioned this, Julianne, and also the Minister has as well, limited or poor access to affordable and quality early childhood education and care services was a significant barrier to young parents remaining in school or getting a job. Young mothers want more affordable childcare options, especially those with longer or later hours to accommodate shift workers. And, you know, this was sort of a wicked kind of trap for a lot of these young people. And a lot of them, in fact, didn't put their children in childcare as a result. Young parents have limited access to transport. And I think Bernadette's example of lugging that pram onto a bus is not uncommon. And they have difficulties getting a driver's license in particular, another pathway to education and work. So this driver's license issue was a really important one that came up constantly in our consultations. It's a barrier for them going to work, attending school and accessing health and care services. Young mothers said they want driving lessons and support in getting a licence. It's also costly as well, and they have to access a car and somebody to sit in the car with them while they get their points up. So this is a real barrier for many young parents, and they've got a baby or babies. Very few of the young mothers we heard from had full or part-time jobs. However, many of the young fathers, if they were engaged, did have. It was particularly hard for young mothers with preschool-aged children and no private transport to work, as they were focused on caring for their children, addressing their own physical and mental health issues and securing stable housing. Many had lost their job when they became pregnant, and many experienced that same old trap of youth employment. It's hard to get a job because they don't have formal qualifications or any experience, but they're also parenting full-time as well. Experiences or perceptions of discrimination, stigma and prejudice by young parents, as well as fear of child protection authorities, including risk of removal of their children, present significant hurdles to these young parents' use of services. Many young parents said they aren't taken seriously or respected by health and other professionals. So this is one of the issues that comes up a lot, being judged in public, people making comments about you, people not taking them seriously, thinking they're a child. This was a very common experience with young parents, and 57% said they experienced stigma and were treated differently because they were a young mother in the survey that we undertook. Many young parents want child protection authorities to do more to support them as parents. So I think this is really instructive. The help out young mums rather than overflowing your foster homes, because you're taking away babies from more than adequate homes. One of the things, and I'll talk about this in a little while, is that these young people on the whole are incredibly motivated to be great parents. And this is something we need to jump on and really support them be those great parents that they clearly desire to be. Programs that combine sexual health education and access to contraception were seen as most effective as reducing adolescent pregnancy and can result in reduced risky sexual behaviour in young people. However, we found that many young people don't know where to access assistance, and mainstream sexual health services are often not youth-friendly. And that's including parenting programs. So one of the recommendations that I'm making is that we need some specialist targeted youth-focused programs in this space. And you'll see some data from the Kids Helpline that show that there's a lot of calls coming in about what pregnancy is and what you can do about it. And so the people are, you know, they don't have a lot of knowledge about these things, and they want information in a youth-friendly way and in an anonymous and confidential way from the Kids Helpline. It's also really important that there are culturally safe programs and services for young parents and their children. These are going to be much more successful in promoting their health, well-being and social and economic independence. And these are like the service, the health service out at Malabar. It is really one where the Aboriginal health workers make sure nothing makes you feel uncomfortable and there's ongoing support even after you leave the service. So this is really important to the young people. Young fathers get very little support or recognition with research, policies or programs to support teenage pregnancy, mostly excluding young fathers. You know, there were one or two in some of these programs, but the poor lads had to sit there listening to discussions about breastfeeding and all sorts of other things, and there wasn't anything much for them. And so, you know, I could see that the potential for them to drift away from those relationships was really high unless we support them to stay, because they're quite isolated, these young men who decided to hang around and be supportive. Overwhelmingly, young parents, though, were positive about the experience of being a parent and were aspirational for themselves and their children. Many reported that being a parent had changed them for the better. Some said they wanted a chance for their children to grow up without the negative experiences they had faced through their own childhood. So for many young people, this is a transformative thing, and because of their strong motivation to be great parents, it's so much in our interest to get in there and wrap all the supports we can around them. And just some of those quotes are really, I think, warm the cockles of my heart. You know, I want her to grow up better than what I did, have an amazing future, a better life than I'd had, a lot less violence and stable. I want to do anything and everything to make my children happy, healthy and loved. I am now focused on how I can make my son's future perfect, happy and safe. Before I was selfish and on the wrong path. She saved my life. So I'll just end up with talking a little bit about the recommendations that I made. The first is ensuring young parents receive services to support them in their parenting role, but these need to be youth-focused. Because as our speakers have indicated, they feel sometimes quite judged in mainstream parenting programs by the older parents and mothers. And that, in turn, if they feel that, they're not going to come back, basically. We need to ensure that young parents and pregnant teenagers have access to health and education services, and these are highly incentivised for them. Some of the things that you're talking about, Attorney. We need to support young parents with their employment needs, particularly for those living in rural and remote Australia. And one of the recommendations that I've made is an expansion of the government program called Parent Next, so that it focuses on youth, has a youth focus, and goes into those areas where the majority of these parents are. We need to develop more information resources for young parents, and we've recommended a mobile-enabled e-resource for young people to address their education and knowledge gap on sexual health issues, pregnancy and parenting. We need to ensure that young parents and pregnant teenagers are not unfairly discriminated against on the grounds of their pregnancy or parental status, and that's in education and employment in particular. We need to ensure that young parents are not targeted on the basis that their age is an at-risk group for child protection assessment purposes, so that they're supported rather than surveilled. You know, everyone makes mistakes when you're parenting, and these young people have so many eyes on them at this point, and they really need to be given a break and get that support that they need. I've also made a number of recommendations for further data collection and research relevant to young parents, including in the areas of employment, housing and young fatherhood. Hope these will assist in developing and implementing policy and programs to better support young parents. The realisation of rights of young parents and their children requires an integrated approach across a range of government initiatives and should be informed by the views of young parents themselves. There's a lot of nested services providing different things. It's really important that young people, young parents can access the full suite of services from the one shop. So we really need to make sure that whatever programs we're supporting, that they either provide or are connected to other programs that can help young parents live and be educated and be great parents and get a job. Okay, so I'm finishing up with a quote from one of the young person who had a baby at the age of 15. Other than the crippling self-doubt I experienced as a young mum, the judgment from other people, including strangers, was soul-destroying. Stereotyping needs to stop, and we need to start celebrating young women who go on to be great parents, whether they finish a uni degree and buy a house or have 10 kids they love and provide for with everything they have. Young women are strong, and each one is capable. All it takes is a few people to believe in you. I think this encapsulates the strength and motivation of and resilience of young parents, regardless of what other people think or how they're treated. It's up to those around them, families, policymakers, decision makers, services in the community, to support them to be the best parents they can be and ensure that they and their children have every opportunity to thrive. Thank you. Thank you for coming. So I just want to end by thanking everybody for coming today. There is morning tea out there. And I also want to particularly thank the young people who participated in the workshops and in the conversations and in the survey. So thank you. Oh, we have gifts. We have gifts. Yep.